After almost 60 years of strong bipartisan support, Congress has cut all federal funding for public media, stripping away a critical pillar of support for local stations like ours. At Vermont Public, we'll lose at least $2 million this year. If all our sustaining members increase their gift by $7 per month, we'll close that gap for good. Increase your gift today and help close the gap at vermontpublic.org/update.
From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Friday, August 22nd, and here are today's headlines. This year's sweeping education reform law includes much stricter rules about where families can go with publicly funded school vouchers. School choice advocates argue those new rules violate the Vermont Constitution's Common Benefits Clause, and they want parents to join a lawsuit that well-known conservative lawyer Deborah Bucknam is preparing. But constitutional law expert Peter Teachout with Vermont Law and Graduate School says the legal challenge would likely fail.
The key problem, it seems to me, is that she kind of fudges who's got the burden of proof when you're bringing a common benefits a claim, a constitutional claim under the Vermont Common Benefits Clause.
The plaintiffs would have to show lawmakers acted arbitrarily and that these new restrictions create substantially unequal opportunities for students. Teachout says prior court rulings in the state indicate that is not easy to do. The Trump administration is considering a plan to reclassify cannabis as a less harmful drug. Right now, cannabis is classified as a Schedule I drug. Those are drugs considered to have no medical value and a high potential for abuse. Heroin and LSD are in that category. The administration is weighing whether to reclassify cannabis as a Schedule III drug, drugs that have some medical benefits and are less subject to abuse, like some prescription pain meds. James Pepper chairs the Cannabis Control Board, and he says that would be a significant development.
That's, breaking some serious ground in the perception of cannabis. And I think that will lead to more research into cannabis and having a more sensible approach to cannabis policy.
The administration is expected to make a decision in several weeks. After a flight attendant strike shut down Air Canada last week, passengers who paid for pricey last-minute flights can now apply for a refund. The Montreal Gazette reports that travelers who shelled out thousands of dollars for the flights are now eligible for refund assistance. During the 3-day strike from August 16th to the 19th, all flights were grounded, 10,000 flight attendants were locked out, and hundreds of thousands of Air Canada passengers were stranded. The paper reports passengers can apply for refunds online at aircanada.com. And the small Vermont town that's made international headlines in recent years for banning influencers during foliage season is once again planning to restrict traffic. Pomfret officials say Cloudland Road will be closed south of Barber Hill Road from Saturday, October 4th through Sunday, October 19th. Barber Hill will be limited to one-way traffic during that time. Officials in neighboring Woodstock have also okayed the closures. This may disappoint some hoping to take photos of the fall scenery on that popular stretch, but Pomfret Select Board Chair Benjamin Brickner says it's a safety issue.
The traffic prior to the road closure had been so intense that getting an ambulance or a fire truck up the road would have been nearly impossible.
The closures do not apply to town residents. Officials say they hope the plan will lead to less traffic and that eventually roads can stay open even during peak season. Coming up, Vermonters have been dealing with an uptick in smoke from wildfires, and Vermont Public's climate and environment reporter has been examining why that is. We'll find out what she's learned after this. Wildfire smoke has blanketed Vermont repeatedly this summer, clogging the air and making it unhealthy for many people to be outdoors. How new is this smoke, and is it here to stay? Vermont Public climate and environment reporter Abigail Giles joined host Jen Jarecki to discuss.
Okay, so Abigail, I've lived in Vermont since the early 90s, and I can't ever remember smoke like this, like we've seen this summer until, recently. So I wonder, is this new for Vermont?
Yeah, it depends on how far back you go. So, before European colonization, wildfires were common across what's now northeastern United States and Canada. In fact, a lot of Canada's forests actually need fire to thrive. It helps trees there reproduce. We see evidence for these ancient fires in tree rings and lake sediment. So, yeah, Vermont definitely used to see the occasional smoky day or week from wildfires. But data we analyzed from the EPA shows that in recent years, Vermont has seen a lot more wildfire smoke. And that lines up with some pretty historic fire seasons in Canada. Climate scientists I talked to from McGill and Dartmouth say it's early, but they're fairly confident a trend is emerging of more smoke here.
Okay, so possibly a new normal. Abigail, where is the smoke coming from and how is it getting here?
This year, it's mostly coming from central Canada, from fires burning in northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba provinces. It's a boreal forest and taiga ecosystem. So think hundreds of thousands of miles of flat land with little waist-high black spruce trees, kind of like the scraggly forest on summits in mountains in Vermont. Unlike back in 2023, when we saw a lot of smoke from fires in Quebec, these are mostly forests that have never been logged. The only towns are Indigenous communities and mining camps, so those are really the only places Canada is fighting the fires. And the jet stream is carrying all that smoke east to Vermont and New England.
Okay, Abigail, you know I have to ask. Is human-caused climate change why we are seeing more smoke here in Vermont?
It's a great question, and the short answer is yes. Human-caused climate change is making northern latitudes warm faster than most places on Earth, and the pace of warming accelerates the closer you get to the Arctic. Northern and central Canada have been in a long heat wave and drought. So places where there are polar bears saw almost 90-degree weather this summer, Jen. And when the air is very hot and dry in a forest, the trees kind of act like a straw. The hot, dry air sucks moisture up out of the soil and the plants. It's kind of like firewood curing in a woodpile. This makes the forest primed to burn. And scientists I talked to said global warming is making Canada's boreal forests burn every 10 to 15 years instead of every 50. So it's also changing how those forests burn in big swaths instead of a natural patchwork. All that means more smoke, and we should expect more frequent, bigger fires will carry that smoke to the northeast. And I talked to one scientist who said this just might be one of the clearest impacts of climate change we see in the next couple decades.
Okay, so Abigail, recently my husband and I tried to take our niece and nephew camping in Franklin County. And as we drove farther north, the smoke just got thicker and thicker. So we checked the air quality index and it was unhealthy for everyone. So we canceled camping and ended up playing a ton of video games inside. I mean, did we overreact? How concerned about wildfire smoke and our health should we be for ourselves and our loved ones?
First, I'm sorry about your camping trip.
Hopefully it'll get rescheduled.
I don't think you may have overreacted. I've talked to some epidemiologists about this who really said wildfire smoke is a toxic cocktail. It's not just wood smoke, but also chemicals from burning homes and all kinds of waste. It's made up of very small particles that really get deep into your lungs. This can really irritate your body. You might get a headache or be short of breath. And long term, there's some early research that shows that people who are exposed regularly might be more prone to certain cancers. So long story short, if it's a bad air quality day, scientists are really saying it's not the time to push yourself on a long run or power through.
Well, last question for you, Abigail. Looking at this EPA data, it seems like before the last couple of years, Vermont enjoyed some really clean air. Is all this wildfire smoke hurting our gains there?
Yeah, Jen, speaking of the 90s, we used to see a lot of days here when the air quality was unhealthy because of pollution from power plants and industry. And the Clean Air Act actually really changed that. That's what got us that clean air we were so used to. Scientists I talked to say wildfire smoke driven by climate change is starting to erode those gains we made by regulating smokestacks. But the U.S. can't regulate fires in Canada. So the solution, scientists say, is to cut global greenhouse gas emissions. And the United States, we're the second biggest contributor to that globally. So even though these fires are burning in another country, our hands in Vermont aren't really clean here.
That was Vermont Public Climate and Environment reporter Abigail Giles and host Jen Jarecki, giving us some important historical and contemporary context for all the wildfire smoke we're seeing in Vermont this summer. And now it's time for our weekly check-in on news from the world of sports. Things sure happen fast over a long stretch of time in the paradoxical world of Major League Baseball. Just last week, the Boston Red Sox were winning enough games to be eyeing a potential takeover of first place in the American League East, and at the very least, they had a nice hold on the first available wild card berth to the playoffs. The New York Yankees, by contrast, were clinging desperately to the final wild card entry, losing games amid bullpen pitching meltdowns and dealing with concerns about the health of some star players heading into the home stretch. Flash forward just 1 week to where we are now, and it's the Red Sox grasping onto the ledge of the playoff roof by their fingertips. The Yankees won 5 in a row, and they've hopped back over Boston into second place in the AL East. And who knows how much the landscape could change again by the time the calendar flips to September. The current woes of the Red Sox started with a seemingly small wrinkle that marred a win when Boston took a comfortable 7-2 lead into the ninth inning of a game against the Miami Marlins last week. It was all good for manager Alex Cora, who didn't need to bring in his overworked closer Aroldis Chapman into a game with that big a lead until he did. Reliever Isaiah Campbell could not get the job done in the ninth and yielded 3 runs to the Marlins to make the game close enough that Chapman did have to come in to shut things down in a 7-5 Red Sox win. That would be fine. A win is a win, except it meant Chapman would not be available for the following game when the Red Sox were trying to complete a sweep of the Fish, and they took a 1-run lead into the ninth, a lead that they would not maintain with their closer unavailable, and the Marlins rallied for an extra innings 5-3 win. 2 more losses at home of the excruciating variety would follow against the last place in the division Baltimore Orioles. The worst of them Tuesday night when the Red Sox trailed 3-1 in the bottom of the 8th inning, loaded the bases with nobody out, and then failed to score a single run when Orioles reliever Rico Garcia struck out 3 in a row. Boston would torture the fan base further by raising their hopes in the bottom of the ninth, courtesy of a 2-run homer that tied the game by newly acquired first baseman Nathaniel Lowe. He was claimed recently off waivers from the Washington Nationals, but Lowe's heroics would go for naught as the Orioles scored in the 11th and held on for a 4-3 win. Not great timing for this kind of slide either, as the Red Sox went into the Lions' Den of the Bronx last night for the first of 4 critical games against the rival New York Yankees, who are feeling more than a little good about themselves after not only rattling off those 5 wins in a row, but hitting a whopping total of 14 home runs over the last 2 games of that winning streak. They also set a major league record by belting 9 home runs in one of those games against the Tampa Bay Rays, the second time this season the Bronx Bombers hit that many in one contest, and that makes them the first club in history to blast 9 round trippers in a single game twice in a season. Now, maybe the Red Sox were able to stop the Yankee momentum last night with Lucas Giolito on the hill, who along with Garrett Crochet has been Boston's best starter this season, but my hopes that such was the case are dwindling even as I reach the end of this sentence. So, good time to move on to see how the New York Mets are doing, and let's just say they can relate to how the Red Sox might be feeling right about now. The Mets had been on cruise control for most of the season, but ran themselves into a prolonged losing skid that now has them relying on the wild card as their most likely entry to the playoffs. And that's a narrow doorway. The Mets had a super slim 1-game lead over Cincinnati for the last available wild card slot heading into their game yesterday against the Washington Nationals. Turning to the WNBA, it was a milestone night Wednesday for Paige Beckers, who set a league record for most points scored by a rookie in a single game when she poured in 44 against the LA Sparks. And yet, it wasn't enough for her Dallas Wings to emerge victorious because Kelsey Plum hit a buzzer-beating game winner to hand LA an 81-80 victory in one of the season's most thrilling contests. The loss, though, doesn't diminish what Beckers accomplished with those 44 points. Even the league's most celebrated player, Caitlin Clark of the Indiana Fever, never scored that many in one game in her rookie season, and Beckers also became the first player in WNBA history to shoot at least 80% from the field, scoring 40 or more points. She drained 17 of her 21 attempts on the night. And those 44 points are also the most scored by any WNBA player so far this season, rookie or otherwise. The Wings are still one of the weaker teams in the league this season. They're already eliminated from the playoff picture, but with Beckers in the fold, the franchise has better days coming much sooner rather than later. And finally, on Tuesday, ultramarathon runner Tara Dower set a new record on the 272-mile long trail with the overall supported fastest known time, or FKT, by any runner, man or woman, in history, reaching the Vermont-Massachusetts border in 3 days, 18 hours, and 29 minutes. And that's our weekly look at news from the world of sports. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. We had additional reporting from Lola Dufour, Bob Kinzel, Mary Engish, and Nathaniel Wilson. Today's episode was edited by Stephanie Colombini, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Rutlieb. Talk to you Monday.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.